Gentlemen, listen. The modern world has demanded transparency, but not everything sacred should be exposed to the light. There are parts of your mind, your history, and your philosophy that are meant to be forged in silence, not broadcast in desperation. The question isn't whether you can tell someone, it's whether you should. And that distinction is the line between a man who governs his life and one who gives it away piece by piece. One, your deepest insecurities. You must understand this insecurity is not sin, it's signal. But revealing those raw parts of yourself to someone who has not earned your soul's blueprint is not vulnerability, it's recklessness. Your role is not to conceal your humanity, but to transform your chaos into strength. If you haven't done that yet, you're handing over confusion. Let the insecurity sharpen your discipline, not your tongue. 2. Your financial weakness or desperation. If you show the cracks in your financial foundation too early, especially to someone who may base attraction on stability, you risk shattering trust before it's ever formed. Speak through your habits. Let your budgeting, your frugality, your consistency speak louder than a desperate monologue. Men don't beg, they build. And when you build, you earn the right to speak from strength. It's not scarcity. 3. Your strategic life plans. When a man speaks his vision before it's solidified in action, he invites doubt, even from those who love him. Talk is premature glory, and often people respect what's proven far more than what's promised. Share the fruits, not the seeds. Protect the soil of your ambition until it bears something real. Power lies in silence that walks toward execution. 4. Your resentments towards other men, to criticize another man from a place of jealousy or wounded ego. That's confession, not courage. And you weaken your stature when you reveal your comparison syndrome to a woman. Handle your judgments like a blacksmith handles molten metal, with precision, heat, and private resolve. Never let it leak from your mouth as weakness. 5. Your past struggles or failures in intimate detail, yes. Your past forged you, but telling someone every detail of your lowest moments doesn't always build intimacy. Sometimes it builds quiet judgment. The goal is not to hide, it's to transcend. Let your current strength speak of what you've conquered. If your story is still bleeding, it's not a scar, it's a wound. Don't hand someone your open wound and expect healing. Stitch it up first. A man must walk a balance between openness and restraint. Reveal who you are, but only when who you are is anchored, not for validation, not for comfort, and certainly not because silence feels too heavy. Because there is something noble, something ancient, in a man who carries the weight of his world with discretion, wisdom, and strength. And that man, he speaks when it's time to lead. He shares when the moment demands truth. But above all, he guards his soul like a kingdom, because he knows not every castle must have open gates. Would you like this turned into a video script or real format? A man's deepest insecurities are not liabilities by default. They become liabilities when they're handed over carelessly, especially to someone who hasn't proven they can carry them with the gravity they deserve. Insecurities are not flaws. They're signals. They tell you where you're lacking, where you need to grow, where your armor is thin. But to confess those raw, unfinished parts of yourself to someone, particularly to a woman, without processing them, without refining them, without understanding what they mean, is not vulnerability, it's irresponsibility. It's not brave to expose your weakness to someone and expect them to validate you for it. That's not courage. That's neediness disguised as honesty. Modern narratives often suggest that being open and showing your vulnerable side is the pinnacle of emotional maturity. That's only half the truth. Yes, emotional openness is a strength, but only when you've done the inner work first. Only when your vulnerability is a story of transformation, not a display of bleeding wounds. You're not supposed to dump your unprocessed fears on someone else and hope they fix you. That's not their job, it's yours. Your insecurity is your responsibility. It's your map to growth, not ammunition for others, not currency for sympathy. When you tell a woman your deepest insecurities too soon, you're not bonding, you're gambling. You're betting that she'll understand something you haven't even learned to articulate to yourself. You're asking her to hold something heavy that you've never been strong enough to lift. That's not a fair expectation. That's emotional immaturity. In a man's life, what you reveal, and when you reveal, it is a measure of strategic intelligence. It's not manipulation, it's wisdom. Imagine trying to hand over a house blueprint to someone who's only asked for a key. You're giving away the entire framework of your internal world without checking if the person receiving it is ready to respect it. You must understand women, like all people, observe your emotional state not just by what you say, but how you hold yourself. If you collapse under your own fears while talking about them, You're sending a message that you don't know how to stand back up, and people are drawn to strength, not perfection, but strength. The kind of strength that says, I know my flaws, and I'm working on them. There's a difference between saying, I'm afraid I'll never be good enough, and saying, I've struggled with not feeling good enough, but I'm working every day to prove that belief wrong. The first is a cry for rescue. The second is a declaration of war against self-doubt. One turns you into a project. The other turns you into a man on a mission. People don't follow broken men who stay broken. They follow men who rebuild themselves in silence and let the results speak. You don't need to hide your insecurities. You need to understand them, own them, mold them, test them against reality. What are they teaching you? What kind of man would you be if you conquered them? What disciplines would that require? That is the work, that is the journey. You're not meant to bleed on people who didn't cut you. You're meant to become so resilient that even your past wounds become part of your power, not a source of pity. A woman doesn't want to be your therapist. She doesn't want to be the container for every crack in your self-esteem. What she desires, consciously or unconsciously, is a man who knows his darkness and has chosen to be stronger than it. Someone who can look his demons in the eye and still build, still lead, still rise. That's who you become when you stop looking for validation and start seeking transformation. So when your insecurities scream, don't silence them, listen, but don't broadcast them either. Channel them, refine them, forge something indestructible from them. And when you've done that, when you've walked through the fire and come out forged, then you can share if you choose, but not for approval, for legacy. When a man exposes his financial weakness or desperation to a woman prematurely, he risks eroding the foundation of respect that is essential in any relationship dynamic. This isn't about lying or pretending you're wealthier than you are. It's about understanding timing, perception, and the psychological framework of masculine and feminine energy. Financial struggle in itself isn't shameful. Everyone starts somewhere. The shame lies in revealing your panic, your uncertainty, your inability to lead your own situation, especially to someone who might be looking to you for strength, stability, or leadership. In many cases, women are not judging your income, but they are watching how you handle scarcity. Do you let it define you? Do you complain, blame the system, or collapse under pressure? Or do you stay grounded, focused, and disciplined in your climb? That difference is everything. When a man speaks too openly about how broke he is, how much he's struggling, or how he doesn't know what to do, it sends a clear signal that he's lost control. And while it might seem honest or raw, it often translates as helplessness. No one man or woman is truly inspired by a person who seems to have surrendered to their circumstances. What inspires people is the fight, the focus, the presence of a plan, even if it's not perfect. A man who says, I'm working extra hours, cutting expenses, building something slowly, is respected, even if he's not yet successful. A man who says, I'm broke and I don't know what to do, seeking pity or comfort, is often pitied at best and quietly disrespected at worst. You are not your bank account, but your relationship to money reflects your relationship to order, discipline, and responsibility. If you constantly speak about your financial problems in a way that emphasizes helplessness, you're communicating that you're not yet the architect of your own life. That shakes the trust others can place in you, especially someone considering a future with you. It's not just about paying bills. It's about whether you can manage chaos, whether you can face pressure without folding, whether you can still lead even when the odds are against you. When you're building, let your results speak. Let your silence echo your discipline. There's honor in being in the middle of the climb, but only if you're climbing. Only if your posture says, I'm not done yet, not I'm stuck forever. Speak your financial journey through your work ethic, through how you carry yourself, how you treat money, and how you plan for the future. There's no need to advertise the struggle. It will be obvious in your hunger. And when you finally reach success, you'll have a story worth telling, not one of victimhood, but one of relentless pursuit. A man who is honest about where he is financially, but balanced with a clear trajectory, earns respect. But a man who unloads his panic, frustration, or dependency onto a woman early on is often unknowingly placing her in a masculine role, asking her to be the emotional rock while he flails. That dynamic rarely ends well. Leadership isn't about pretending to have all the answers. It's about holding the line when the answers aren't clear. It's about moving forward, even with limited resources. It's about being able to say, this is where I am, but it's not where I'm staying. That kind of statement, when backed by action, carries power. There is dignity in the grind. but only if you're grinding. And if you're not there yet, the best thing you can do is stay silent, work harder, and speak only with your progress. Because desperation might earn you momentary attention, but discipline earns you long-term respect. A man's strategic life plans are sacred. They are not casual conversation pieces, and they are certainly not meant for early disclosure to anyone who hasn't earned a place in the inner architecture of your vision. When you speak too soon about your dreams, your goals, and your larger-than-life plans, especially to a woman, you risk bleeding the energy out of them before they've even begun to take form. It's not because women aren't supportive or capable of understanding ambition, but because premature exposure weakens the sacredness of what should be born through action, not through words. Ideas are fragile in their infancy. They need solitude. They need grinding in silence. They need nights without applause and mornings without validation. When you speak of them too early, you give people the power to influence, doubt, or subtly redirect your trajectory. And worst of all, you begin to feel the illusion of progress without actually moving an inch. Telling someone your plans before they are proven makes you vulnerable, not in a noble way, but in a naive one. It makes you susceptible to feedback you're not ready for and puts your vision in a social pressure cooker it was never meant to endure. It creates false accountability, which often breeds anxiety instead of action. You start performing the plan for approval instead of executing it with clarity and purpose. In the masculine path, movement speaks louder than promise. Execution is the currency. Vision without labor is just imagination. A man must build before he speaks. His plans must be tested in solitude before they are spoken into the world. When you reveal a vision too early, especially to a woman who may be emotionally invested in your stability or leadership, you risk unsettling the foundation of trust, not because she doesn't believe in you, but because what you say might contradict what you show. And women, as intuitive beings, will always trust what they see over what they hear. If your plans are grand, but your daily behavior is inconsistent, you're not communicating ambition, you're broadcasting confusion. This leads to doubt, and doubt erodes attraction, partnership, and faith in your capability. A man's vision must be a fortress, not a tent that collapses in the wind of others' opinions. Let your plans be protected by discipline. Let them mature in the silence of daily effort. You don't owe anyone the blueprints to a building that hasn't been constructed yet. What you owe is presence, work ethic, progress. These speak volumes. These build credibility. The right time to share your vision is when your actions already reflect it, when it's not an abstract dream but a measurable pursuit, when it's no longer a possibility, it's a probability. Then and only then can you open the door to someone else's perspective or support. There is also a psychological power in mystery. When you don't reveal everything, you maintain a sense of depth that others respect. Not because you're hiding something, but because you're busy becoming something. You're not a man with a rehearsed speech. You're a man with a quiet mission. A man who moves first, talks later. A man who treats his future like a responsibility, not a conversation starter. This kind of presence creates gravitational pull. It signals seriousness, focus, and maturity. So hold your vision close. Let your plans speak only through your results. Share the destination when you're halfway there, not when you're just imagining the road. Because the man who talks too much about where he's going often never gets there. But the one who walks quietly and consistently, he arrives stronger, sharper, and more respected than the one who needed to be heard before he had something real to show. Resentment towards other men is something every man will experience at some point in life. It often arises when you perceive someone else as having more power, more recognition, more attention, more success. It stings especially hard when that man is in your circle, or even worse, when you feel like you've worked harder but received less. The emotion is natural, but how you manage it is a reflection of your character. Sharing this resentment too freely, especially with a woman, doesn't portray vulnerability or openness. It quietly signals insecurity, inferiority, and lack of self-command. You're not just talking about someone else, you're revealing a flaw in how you see yourself. And that never creates respect. It creates quiet concern. Because if you can't appreciate the success of others, how can you ever fully step into your own? When you speak about another man with envy, you place yourself beneath him. You declare with your tone, your words, and your energy that you are not yet his equal. This doesn't mean you should lie or fake admiration. It means you should recognize when that resentment is a signpost, not a personality trait. It's there to tell you where you're falling short, where you're not putting in enough work, where you're not being honest with yourself. But instead of processing it, refining it, and letting it fuel you into something higher. Many men project it outward. And when you do that in front of a woman, it places you in a reactive frame, a passive one. She sees a man who judges others to feel taller, not a man who's focused on building himself to become stronger. That shift in perception is subtle but profound. It's important to realize that when you express resentment towards another man, his status, his wealth, his charm, his success, you're exposing a mirror you haven't faced. Maybe you believe you deserved what he has. Maybe you think the world is unfair. But voicing it doesn't make you seem principled. It makes you seem bitter. Especially to a woman, it sends an unconscious signal that your self-worth is dependent on someone else's outcome. And that erodes confidence, not only hers in you, but yours in yourself. What's needed isn't to suppress the resentment, but to transmute it, to say, what can I learn from this discomfort? What does it show me about where I need to rise? This is the work of internal alchemy, turning envy into energy. You observe the success of another man, and instead of shrinking, you expand, you study, you reflect, you recalibrate. That's what strong men do. And they do it quietly, without spectacle, without gossip, without trying to tear someone else down to justify their own stagnation. Because in truth, no one is truly your competition. The only man you need to overcome is the one you were yesterday. That's the only battle that matters. To speak resentfully about another man is to leak your power. It says you have not fully owned your path. It tells the world and any woman listening that your internal state is shaped more by what others have than by what you're building. And that's dangerous, because women are intuitive creatures. They don't just hear what you say, they feel what you mean. They feel whether you're leading your own life or just reacting to someone else's. And if they feel you are small in the presence of other men, they will never fully trust your ability to stand tall in life. So guard your mind, discipline your speech, use your envy as fire, not fuel for gossip. Let others be great, and let their greatness drive you inward, not outward. The more you honor your own journey, the less time you'll have to measure someone else's. And in doing so, you reclaim something most men never do, the dignity of silence, the power of focus, and the strength to rise on your own terms. Your past mistakes are not a badge you are required to wear in every conversation. Especially when it comes to speaking with a woman, revealing too much about the darkest or most painful chapters of your past can be more damaging than healing. Not because the truth doesn't matter, but because timing, maturity, and context matter even more. When you share every error, every moment of weakness, or every personal failure too early, or with the wrong frame, it doesn't create intimacy, it creates uncertainty. You're not just recounting events, you're shaping how others perceive your identity. And if your past is still bleeding into your present, you're not telling a story of redemption. You're living in regret. That doesn't build attraction, it builds doubt. A man should not be defined by his worst moments, but if he keeps dragging them into every conversation, he becomes a prisoner of them. When you sit across from a woman and talk about how you cheated, how you failed, how you ruined something or lost yourself, you're revealing chapters that only make sense in the context of growth and transformation. If you haven't yet completed that arc, if you're still lost, still guilty, still unsure, it comes across not as transparency but as emotional instability. You may think you're being real, but to her, you may be signaling that you haven't evolved, that the man sitting in front of her is still tethered to the version of himself that caused pain, chaos, or collapse. The past can be your greatest teacher, but only if you've mastered its lessons. Until then, silence is discipline. You're not lying by withholding every detail. You're respecting the process. You're protecting your new identity from being distorted by an old narrative. Growth requires privacy. There's strength in being able to say, I've made mistakes, without listing them like a resume of regret. If you must speak on your past, let it be from a place of strength. Let it be clear that the man you were no longer exists, that you buried him and built again, that you didn't just apologize, you restructured your entire way of being. And even when you do reach that place, remember not everyone needs to know everything. A woman doesn't need a complete psychological excavation on the first few dates. She needs to know who you are now, what you stand for, what you're building. If the past comes up, it should be purposeful, not performative. It should reinforce your current character, not explain away your past failures. Too many men use confession as a substitute for self-awareness. They share their wrongdoings in the hope that someone will give them the forgiveness they haven't given themselves. That's not her job. That's yours. Forgiveness begins within. There's also something to be said about emotional weight. When you offload every mistake to a woman, especially early in a relationship, you're asking her to carry something you should have already resolved. That's not love. That's emotional outsourcing. That's looking for a mother, not a partner. And no matter how nurturing a woman might be, she cannot and should not be tasked with healing wounds she didn't cause. Your past is valuable, but it's sacred. It deserves reflection, refinement, and the dignity of silence until it serves a clear purpose. You are not what happened to you. You are who you choose to become in response to it. Speak when your story is ready to empower, not when your pain still needs an audience. And when the time does come to open up, speak like a man who's been through fire and built a kingdom from the ashes, not like one who's still waiting for someone to save him from the smoke. Let your actions now speak louder than the mistakes of your past. Let your discipline, your presence, and your progress testify on your behalf. A man who owns his past but is no longer owned by it, he commands respect. He doesn't need validation. He walks with clarity. And in that presence, people can feel the difference between someone who's still haunted by regret and someone who has risen from it with quiet power. Your insecurities are not meant for display. They are meant for discipline. Every man carries a set of them, doubts about his looks, his worth, his performance, his status, his place in the world. But the question is not whether you have insecurities. That's a given. The question is, what do you do with them? When you share your insecurities too openly, especially with a woman, you're not creating emotional depth. You're disrupting polarity. Masculine energy is rooted in stability, in groundedness, in direction. When a man starts pouring out his emotional confusion and self-doubt without a clear sense of self-mastery, it places the emotional burden on her shoulders. That doesn't deepen the bond, it distorts the dynamic. She begins to sense not a man on a mission, but a boy needing reassurance. And whether she says it out loud or not, something shifts in how she sees you. There's a common lie in modern culture that full emotional transparency is always healthy, but timing matters, framing matters, intention matters. There is a difference between conscious vulnerability and emotional dumping. A man must learn to process his insecurities internally or with trusted masculine mentorship before exposing them in intimate settings. It's not to hide them, but to refine them. Because what a woman respects isn't a man who shows her all his wounds. It's a man who's clearly been wounded, but carries himself like he's healed, or at the very least, is actively healing through disciplined action. She senses the difference between a man who's growing and one who's spiraling. One invites partnership, the other demands emotional labor. When you speak too often about your fears, your anxieties, your shame, especially if they revolve around your worth as a man, you risk shifting the weight of your emotional work onto someone else. And over time, that breeds imbalance. She may begin to feel like the emotional leader, the stable one, the anchor. And once that happens, the polarity flips, and attraction often erodes silently. It's not that she doesn't care. It's that she begins to sense a lack of direction, a lack of certainty. And masculine presence without certainty is like a ship without a compass, adrift, reactive, unreliable. A man must learn how to hold his insecurities without bleeding them onto others. That is where inner strength is forged. It's not about being a stone wall. It's about being a solid foundation. Someone who feels deeply, yes, but who processes privately and expresses with clarity. Someone who doesn't look for validation in his weakness, but builds resilience from it. There is a time and place to speak about what bothers you, what you fear, what you haven't yet mastered. But those moments must come from power, not panic. From stillness, not need. When you share from that space, your words are received as insight, not instability. Every man must confront his inner shadows, the fear of not being enough, the shame of past mistakes, the quiet voice that says, you're not worthy, but that battle is yours to fight first. Don't recruit someone else to soothe what you haven't yet faced. And don't assume that oversharing equals intimacy. True intimacy is built on trust, not on unloading. It's built on consistency, presence, and self-respect. When you show that you can face your own darkness and still move forward with purpose, that's when you earn real respect. That's when you become magnetic, not because you're flawless, but because you're forged. So own your insecurities in silence, refine them through action. And when you do speak of them, do so like a man who's wrestling with his soul, not begging for approval. Because a man who has tamed his inner chaos doesn't need to advertise it. You'll feel it in how he speaks, how he stands, how he navigates life. And that quiet confidence, earned through struggle and solitude, is worth more than 1,000 words of emotional self-disclosure spoken from desperation. Your financial struggles are not something to be exposed prematurely or carelessly, especially in the presence of a woman. They are not a symbol of your identity, nor are they a tool to gain sympathy or validation. Financial hardship is a challenge many men will face at some point. But the way you carry it, the way you speak about it, and the way you move through it speaks volumes about your character. When you openly discuss your financial issues too early in a relationship or when the dynamic is still forming, it can shift the energy from masculine leadership to uncertainty. It tells her, consciously or unconsciously, that you are not yet standing on solid ground, that you're still in a state of survival, not sovereignty. And while many women can be compassionate, it's not their role to anchor a man through his financial chaos. That responsibility lies with you. It's not about pretending to be rich. It's about refusing to let your current limitations define your presence. There's a way to carry lack with dignity, to remain composed, focused, and forward-facing even when you're rebuilding. But when you speak about your money problems from a place of frustration, victimhood, or emotional fatigue, it doesn't generate connection. It creates concern. You may think you're being honest, but what she hears is instability, a lack of direction, and the possibility of becoming entangled in a future burden. That doesn't foster trust, it breeds hesitation. Because a man's financial state isn't just about money, it's about leadership, decision making, and self-command. If those things are clearly missing, she will instinctively question whether she can rely on you long-term. A man in financial hardship must embody silence, strategy, and sacrifice, not self-pity. He must learn to become the kind of man who handles problems without turning them into emotional performances. A man who gets up every morning and works towards stability, even if no one sees it. That presence is far more powerful than any words. You're not obligated to share your bank balance, your debt, or your anxieties about money. You are obligated to take responsibility for them. Quietly, relentlessly, honorably, because your worth isn't defined by your income. It's defined by your effort, your integrity, and your refusal to stay where you are. When you do speak of money, let it be from a place of intention. Let it be when you're building something, not when you're drowning in doubt. Speak about your vision, your discipline, and your ability to create. Let her see that even if you're not where you want to be financially, you are a man with a plan, a man who is moving with direction, not desperation. That subtle difference changes everything. It separates those who are merely surviving from those who are steadily climbing. Financial struggle is nothing to be ashamed of, but broadcasting it, especially without the frame of growth, turns it into a signal of helplessness. And helplessness is not attractive, it's draining. Women are wired to sense energy. If your energy is defeated, chaotic, or scattered, she will feel it. And once she feels like she has to carry that weight emotionally or financially, she shifts into protection mode, not devotion mode. And from that place, real intimacy cannot grow. So hold your struggle like a warrior. Let your actions be louder than your complaints. Fix your finances in private and emerge later as a man who rebuilt himself from the ground up, not as one who sought sympathy before he laid the first brick. When a man masters his financial chaos, he doesn't just earn money, he earns respect. It's from others and from himself. That respect cannot be bought, faked, or talked into existence. It is forged in the fires of delayed gratification, hard decisions, and quiet perseverance. And once you have it, it changes the way you walk, the way you speak, and the kind of woman you attract. Because the world doesn't respond to your excuses. It responds to your execution.